Right? So this is like such a pleasant um side effect of this whole journey for me was like accidentally coming out because I don't think I ever told you that like the posting about the podcast on my personal Facebook profile was a total accident. I It was like an ADHD moment where I thought I was posting it on this Facebook page that I had created that nobody knew about, and I accidentally posted it on my personal profile, and then I was like, "Oh well, I guess it's out there."
Yeah.
And I had like a number of people message me and say like, "Oh wow, I know some so and so, or I know so and so has it," and then you were like, "I'm there with you, girl," and I was like, "Oh my god." So that's been super exciting because I love you and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. Yeah, all right, yeah, that totally makes sense. I see it. I see it all.
That was my favorite part was reading and be like, no, yep,
I
I'm
know.
right there with you. I see that. Uh-huh.
Well,
I
it's
love
funny
more.
because that is sort of part of that diagnosis journey is realizing like how there are like all of your favorite people in your life probably
Mm.
have it and how do you tell them? Like what's, that feeling of like, yeah, like I remember as soon as I was diagnosed, I called both of my brothers and was like, "So, guess what? You probably have this too and here's
Yeah.
why." And we all had the same misconceptions about what it
Yeah.
looks like. So I'm so excited to sit down with you and find out like what was this journey like for you? I had no idea. When were you diagnosed? How long ago? And kind of what led up to all of that?
Okay. I've always been all over the place. I think you know that from knowing me. I've never, and not even necessarily physically, just like
Yeah.
I always equate my brain to being a train station, and some people maybe have one or two tracks that run, and that works for them. And I just see my brain as having like 30 different trains leaving, coming, going. What? Huh? And that's sort of how I like have always been. I've always been a job hopper. I get bored. I do what I need to do there, and then I'm like looking for something else. Or I think I have currently a list of 17 hobbies that I enjoy, have never become a master at any. I actually feel like I can't become a master because I can't actually. I tell my husband all the time, I drive him crazy. And I tell him all the time, like, I wish I had more time in this life. There's not enough time. I want to do this job and I want to learn what it's like to be this. And I wanted to, and he's like, settle and just choose one. And to me, that's completely impossible. But that's sort of how I've always been. Even professionally, I'm a registered dietitian and I should be able to sit and read a scholarly article from front. I should be able to do that. I need to be able to do that. My brain just, and I'm interested. I get through like the abstract and I'm literally like off in a daze somewhere else and I want to do it and I truly have a difficult time really forcing myself to do that. I just can't actually do it.
It's because you got what you needed from the abstract.
Yeah,
That's what I
maybe.
kind of realize is that like usually when I get through the first paragraph of something, if it's well written enough, I'm like, okay, I've already gotten what I need from this, and so why do I have to read the entire thing? It's just repetition at that point.
And I
Anyway.
guess I like that. So my husband, and you've met him, I believe. He's an herbalist and he has like the complete opposite brain of me where he can hyper focus. He has this thing, herbalism, where he's so obsessed with it, he hyper focuses. So he could take like a 15-page dry as bone article and sit and read it for fun and enjoy it and absorb it. And I like I start to twitch watching him do this, thinking, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up with a little brother who was extremely classic ADHD, what we would consider like what most people would assume is ADHD, bouncing
So
off walls,
so Mark was
hyperactive.
diagnosed?
My little brother, yeah,
Okay.
he off the walls, absolutely for his whole life. Very, very, difficult for him to like chill. I remember growing up, my mom like had to watch his diet very much. Always remember, and even in the back of my head, it's like those are the devil because if he had corn syrup or any food dyes, he was absolutely like off the walls. But if he didn't, he was chill. And I just always remembered that growing up. So to me, that's what I had in my head of ADHD, and not some of the things that now I'm learning women can be experiencing with ADHD. So I never really thought I had it. until I went to a new therapist maybe 5 years ago. I really, yes, I really wanted another baby, and my husband wasn't on that same page with me, and I was really struggling with kind of needing to have a baby, but he wasn't really, that wasn't on his life agenda, you know what I mean? So I kind of needed somebody else to sort of help me cope with that. And I went to a new therapist, and like 3/4 of the way through the session, she just kind of like held up her hand and she's like, just throwing it out there. You know, you have ADHD bad, right? Like, you have this. And I was like, me? What do you mean? And I know I'm all over the place, but I was like, and I forgot what she said the rest of the time, because in my head I'm like, huh,
I
and
have to go
but
read. I have to go read about it. I have to go do this. I have to do research. Yeah.
so, and I'm always one of those people that's like, ooh, a diagnosis, it must be what I am. Let me go. Like, I get all into it for a brief period of time, let's all be honest, until I move on to the next thing. But I remember coming home and reading about ADHD and adult onset. That's what she told me. You probably have adult onset ADHD, which, looking back my whole life, I've obviously had these issues, but it was fascinating to learn all of the different things that I had been experiencing was a thing. I'm reading like the list of symptoms and being like, yep, yep, yep. Oh my God, yes. So kind of fun in a way, and then kind of like, what do I do now? In a way.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, that was really a turning point for me was like when my therapist who has ADHD started suggesting it years ago, but I didn't really like it didn't register. Like I was sort of like, "Oh, I don't know what to do with that information." Like, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
I do have manic energy and I do like really like I take on projects. I take on new identities. I'm like I've
Yes.
had more jobs than I can think of, and like I get super
Yep.
interested in things and then drop them, and
Yep.
so like those things I related to. But then when I took the online self test for women from Attitude Magazine, when it was talking about like how much you hate having somebody swing by your house without not without warning
Yes.
and like this
Yeah.
stuff, or like how much you hate traffic. Like it was all of these ways in which I was connecting to the hyperactive mind element in a way that I was like, oh, okay, this is much more than just feeling like a scatterbrain. Like there's
Yeah.
much more of like a social and emotional element
Yes.
to this. But again, like didn't really know what to do with that information
Yeah.
until the pandemic, when I really like I had like a total breakdown in the beginning of the pandemic, and that was when my therapist was like, I think it would help you to look into
Yeah.
ADHD a little more in terms of how to help yourself in this moment, because everything I was trying to do wasn't working. And so I think
Yeah.
she sort of at some point knew that what I'm experiencing when I'm interviewing a lot of women was that sense of like, there's something about just like making some deep connection that all of these seemingly unrelated struggles that you've experienced over the course of your life all have this one magical too good to be true source, and like what to do with that information.
Oh, how I can relate to that.
Yeah,
I
right.
think with the pandemic, it's forced a lot of us to be like totally shut down. I kind of feel this way, and I don't, just from talking to other people, I feel like I am exhausted all of the time because I didn't realize this until recently. I'm spending so much of my time trying to maintain control because I know that I can get off kilter so fast. I need the day to be exactly just so. I need to know exactly what to expect of my day so that I can keep that, try and maintain some sort of sense of normalcy and function. And
Mm.
with the pandemic, that just kind of got shot to hell. We all just, I remember one time we went to a wedding of a friend and I got so dressed up. I was like, I did my hair. This was like, she's like a fancy person. So I like wanted to be fancy. And we got to the reception hall and people were vacuuming and no one was there. And I was like, what? Where is everyone? How could this be? It's the time. And I talked to like the person came over to us and she was like, oh my God, this wedding is tomorrow. I I remember, and my husband still remembers this. I shut down completely. I literally just shut down. I didn't freak out. I just like my brain could not cope with the fact that this was my plan for the day. We had set up childcare. We had done all these things, and that that the fact that I had gotten it all screwed up and I had to do all this stuff now to create normalcy for the next day, I shut right down. I could not cope. I'll never forget it because it was such an extreme moment of that.
Yeah.
Where my brain just could not grasp what to do next. It was bizarre. But I've seen a lot of that with my research, is that we so strive to have some sort of sense of order that when the order we've tried to create goes down, we go down with it.
Yeah. And that really was locked down for all of us, and why I think
Yeah.
there's been such this proliferation of diagnoses
Yeah.
after COVID. Yeah, you know, it's interesting to bring that up because I feel like that a lot of the time I've related to that so much, that feeling of like you spend all of your time organizing because it doesn't matter how much organizing you do, you still feel like an overarching sense of chaos. And so it's like the organizing becomes the the goal, you know, like it's
Yeah.
almost like there's no time that you ever get to the destination of feeling organized.
Ever.
So
Ever.
right, and
But
so
you're
it just
twitchy the whole
becomes,
time trying to maintain this that doesn't really ever come to fruition. And then trying to, it's
yeah.
exhausting. I realize that's one of the reasons why I'm like burnt out more at the end of the day than say somebody else I know that maybe doesn't have this, because there's just this constant need to try to create order.
Do you think it's the organizing that is exhausting, or is it the belief that um is it like when you suddenly come face to face with the futility of it all that you know, and then you shut
Yes.
down, like is
Yeah.
that the exhaustion? Because I so
There you
many
go.
people I talk to like talk about masking, you know, and that feeling of like we spend so much of our time trying to
Yeah.
present ourselves in a certain way,
Mhm.
to try to be live up to a certain
Oh yeah.
view of who we
Mhm.
are, and that sense of like our public identity is one of like very competent and very organized and very sort of you know, always up for everything, and then like secretly inside we just feel like a complete chaotic hot mess, and that's something like I think we all kind
Totally.
of share that. And so there's this sense of like keeping up an appearance or keeping up
Yeah.
this idea that like I'm supposed to be somebody that I'm not,
Mm.
and then you realize that not everybody feels that way. Like
Hmm.
I just sort of believe that was part of the human condition, and so sometimes now I think like realizing that that's not how everybody feels,
Yeah.
almost like it's like you're staring the reality in the face, and then that becomes the exhaustion. It's just the like
Mm.
futility of it all. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get that. I totally get that. Imposter syndrome is real. I have that completely all the time, where I just feel like I'm just trying to be this person, but I don't deserve to be there. I shouldn't be there, or I don't know how I got there. And I don't know if that is something you ever experienced, but
Oh my god. Yes. Are you kidding me? Of course. And not only that, but and I call it piece of shit syndrome, which I stole from one of my guests, Rachel, who talks about it a lot, but that's, you know, that was I think one of the big tip-offs for my therapist too, which was like I would come in there week after week after week, and I would talk about this thing, and I was talking about this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm really interested in this, and then but at the end of the day I would be like, but like I feel terrible about myself and I feel like a piece of shit. And she was like, how are you, like why are you always defaulting to this? And I think that was, I didn't realize at the time that that was a huge part of that emotional element, and that rumination element was a huge part of female ADHD, or I guess any adult
yeah.
ADHD. So I, again, like I didn't, I just thought I was chronically depressed because that's what everybody had told me. I know, right?
So whatever, yeah, I could see how the diagnosis would be a feeling of like utter joy and oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And always going back to the grief. Like I sort of feel like now it's been 6 months. Um, actually, maybe more. We're in March now. God. Anyway, it's, you know, for me. Wait, when were you? So when were you diagnosed? Did you even say?
So it had to be five
This
years
was
ago, but
5 years ago.
this
Okay.
was through I mean, a therapist told me this. I assume that's a diagnosis.
So you've never
5 years.
medicated.
I have tried it, and it truly actually made me feel like a real human. I
Mm,
remember I tried Adderall, um, just to see if it helped. And I remember I've talked to my dad about this because my dad also has tried it. He has ADHD and he doesn't like to admit it, but you know, we had to get it from somewhere in a sense, you know, if it's genetic. and he tried it as well. And we both had this like connection moment when we talked about it, where it felt like the puzzle piece we'd been trying to fit in upside down finally turned the right way and locked in, and our brains were just able to focus. I never felt stimulated. I never felt like I was on something. I just remember being like, I can breathe. I want to do this. I actually want to do the day. What can I do today? Like, I think I want to play with my kids today. I actually felt like instead of spending all of my time, I hadn't even realized, focusing on just existing, quote unquote, normally, I could breathe. It was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing, actually. But I don't necessarily want to take those things all the time, and I don't know if, to me, that's like a once in a while thing, if I need to with my doctor, but I don't know. It felt really good, but I also feel like I kind of want to work towards figuring out how to do that if I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience with Vyvanse, which is the
Okay.
same, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're both the same stimulant.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was immediate, that immediate feeling of like, oh, my brain is so quiet and calm. And I had a very similar experience when I first tried SSRIs, but also I took SSRIs when I had newborns. So like I'm like there's so many other factors. There's
Oh
the
yeah.
sleep deprivation and the crying and all of that other stuff. But I like definitely have that distinct memory of like before and after taking the medication, of just like after taking the medication, just feeling like just calm and feeling like I could do the thing, like I
Yes.
always said it helped me cope. But then I
Yes.
also noticed with Vyvanse that after about a week, I didn't feel that anymore. Like I sort of felt like it wasn't the things I was looking for, like
Yep.
help with focus or help with
Mm-hmm.
like actually accomplishing tasks and staying on those tasks and not getting distracted. It wasn't helping with that, even though my brain felt a little quieter. And so then I
Yeah.
just sort of was like, do I
See,
want to stay on this? Do I not? And
totally.
I mean, I was, when I first started this podcast, I was madly asking every single guest, like, are you medicating? Because some people say, like, it's the best thing that ever happened to them and it's been life changing. And I'm like, what does that mean? What is life changing? What are you getting from it? What are you, how,
Right.
and I just had so many questions, as I always do about any psychotropic medication, where
Of
I'm
course.
just like, I get so exhausted by the constant questioning of, is this working?
Right.
That I end up going off of it because I'm sort of like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's sort of easier to just exist at a baseline of no medication, and then
Yes.
and then
Yes.
it's like even like as a registered dietitian where you're like, okay, let's figure out what's bothering you internally, so they'll take everything out and then slowly start introducing things one at a time. So I'm like,
Yes.
so I do the same thing with medication
Yeah.
where I'm like, okay, now I've reintroduced B6, or like certain, like now I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm constantly playing with
Playing.
what is working and what isn't. But it's so exhausting.
It is. I I'm sort of in the middle of I'm sort of in the middle of all of that myself right now. I actually find you posting that accidental post to be actually genius for me in a way, for my own self, because I hadn't really considered all of the ADHD. It was like back here in the back of my mind. And then when you posted, I was like, oh, I should really look into this again. This is actually a thing for me. I should actually start paying attention to this more.
Mm.
And I started doing more research. And then, just accepting that I have this, whatever, in the last 6 months or so. And then recently, this is sort of going to come out of left field, but it's going to come back to ADHD, because I've recently had this insane epiphany about my own health that is totally changing some things for me. Um, I had a I had the soup at work. I worked at a nursing home, and I had the soup for lunch one day, and absolutely had the craziest reaction about an hour later. I got a red face. I had trouble breathing. My heart rate was all over the place. My anxiety went all over like out of control. I was running to the bathroom. It was an insane reaction, and I did not know what was happening. And then I remember that I have similar but less reactions when I drink whiskey, or if I have wine, or um, coffee or something like that. And so I had asked the kitchen, like, did you do something different? I eat the soup all the time. What did you do something different? And he came in, he's like, they got us some cheap soup base we have to use. And he came in, and the main ingredient was MSG. And I had never really thought too much about that in the past, but I my dietitian brain kind of clicked on from, I never focus on myself with these things. I think about other people, but for myself, it's like I like lose all smarts. But my brain actually clicked in, and I started thinking about histamines and how this was a complete histamine response that I had with the MSG in the soup, because MSG is extremely high in histamines. So I started doing more research. I like got mad about it, like so interested, mad in a good way. I started, when you had the ADHD, right? You like voraciously like absorbing like a sponge. So I started doing more research about histamine intolerance, which was like, I looked at the list of symptoms and it was like tick, 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 tick. And I saw one of the symptoms was ADHD. And I was like, interesting, because I was meeting all these other criteria, but I also have this ADHD type of brain. So then I started going even further into researching this histamine intolerance, because my face is always red. I cover it with a ton of makeup. I always react to different foods. My hands swell. I get this like swollen thing, like this whole bit. So then I start looking into why people get this histamine intolerance. And one of them was having the MTHFR gene abnormality. So I was like, oh, I did 23andMe years ago. Let me look. So I got all excited. I looked up what genes I'd have to look up. And then I looked on 23andMe and I looked into you can they have a bank thing that you can type in what you're looking for and it will tell you. So then it turns out that I have the worst possible case of MTHFR gene abnormality, which, among other things, if you have this gene abnormality and you're not doing anything about it, it's sort of like a toilet that you keep clogging, but trying to flush at the same time. A lot of these pathways get blocked up and so it's this whole cascade of events of things that can happen in your body, one of which is this histamine intolerance. But then I found another connection with MTHFR and ADHD brain, and how so many people who have ADHD also have this gene abnormality. It's very common. So I was like, I've been like on a rip the last 2 to 3 weeks with this, because on top of having this brain that's all over the place, I feel like garbage all the time, tired, feel like I have the flu, brain fog, like you wouldn't believe, like a blanket is on me.
This was before the soup, or this?
What's that?
Was this before the soup or since the
Yeah.
soup?
Oh, yeah. This has
Okay.
been for years, where I just feel like garbage all the time. I chalked it up. I had thyroid cancer 10 years ago, which and I'm on thyroid medication, and I've chalked it up to that. Like, it's just the thyroid not being there. So I'm just taking this dose every day of thyroid medication, whether it's the right dose or not every day. I mean, your body needs different amounts all the time, and I'm just shooting this one dose. So bringing it all together, I decided to really go on like a histamine intolerance / MTHFR elimination diet 2 weeks ago to this day, where I cut out anything with folic acid, which is one of the things that with MTHFR gene abnormality, we can't take folic acid, which is the synthetic form of folate that they enrich in all kinds of, when you see enriched flour, enriched products, they throw folic acid in there. And if you have this issue, your body cannot convert that folic acid to folate. And so it creates this whole cascade of events of things that should or should not happen if you can do that. One being like serotonin and dopamine production, mood, and the way that you handle stress. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So I've been on this diet for 2 weeks and I feel like a new person. I can't even explain it to you how much I feel like a new person just in 2 weeks. So that's like freaking me out. But one of them in the last even few days is that I'm starting to feel that same calm that I felt on Adderall, where my brain seems like, I know I'm excited right now because I'm excitable about this, but I feel like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Could this be helping? I'm not saying it's going to make it all go away, but was the way that I was eating, even though I didn't mean to, was it the wrong way for my body? And it sort of made my ADHD exacerbated to hell. I mean, it was pretty bad. And all of a sudden it's sort of starting to feel like the stars are aligning again. That puzzle piece is starting to fit in. And it's kind of a miserable diet, I'm not going to lie, but I would do it to the rest, forever, if it meant that I could have energy again. Cause I feel like I'm jacked up on something. I have so much energy in the last few days. I'm not taking anything. It's kind of exciting. So that's something that I've been very excited about in the last, couple of weeks, is this whole connection maybe with MTHFR gene abnormality and mood and the way that we perceive life.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
It is, and I feel like there are many ways in which I wonder how many ADHD symptoms, because I'm always fascinated with conversations about comorbidities, because I feel like there
Mm-hmm.
are comorbidities like dyslexia
Hmm.
and um, social anxiety. Those sort of feel like those are comorbidities when it comes to ADHD. But then I feel like we start talking about symptoms as
Hmm.
though they are comorbidities, where I feel like depression, or, that sort of absent-mindedness or rumination, like a lot of these things that are symptoms that may be ADHD, but also, like you said, like could be a number of other things that, there could be so many other elements that are exacerbating symptoms that look like ADHD. And I've heard a lot of physicians who will talk about like trauma, that there are a lot of people who have PTSD will exhibit similar symptoms to ADHD. And so maybe it's not ADHD, maybe it's the trauma. And I'm like, how do you untangle that? Because there's
Yeah.
so much trauma involved in living an undiagnosed life. Even if it's undiagnosed ADHD, if it's undiagnosed some other
Yeah.
genetic malady, or even like my own experience that I had with my jaw and being, with
Yes.
the feeling like there was, that in its not knowing what the source of your problems is a trauma in itself. And so it's like, how
Yes.
do you even decide that something is trauma induced or just sort of correlative to the trauma that is induced by something else? like, and and so like that's so fascinating to me, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours about like food and nutrition with ADHD, because I like for me personally, like my hyper focus has been why so many people with ADHD respond to intermittent fasting and keto.
Hmm.
And so I have this history of being very anti-diet, and feeling like caloric restriction is just has so many other
Yes.
disastrous effects on
Hmm.
our bodies that it's
Hmm.
not worth it. But then I'm seeing like I've like geek out about all of this research about autophagy and ketosis and like using fat for fuel instead of glucose for fuel. And like when I tried it, it was freaking amazing. Like I had a very similar reaction, which was like I felt better than I've ever felt in my life when I tried intermittent fasting, and was like, okay, what is happening here?
Hmm.
And like, what do I do with this information?
I know.
and and again, and again it was sort of like, how, like, what is it? Is this long term? Is this not?
Right.
Like, I just felt like it just threw everything I knew about eating and
Hmm.
up in the air. And and I always think of you when it comes to breakfast, because you were always one of those people in my life who talked about the importance of like putting fire on the putting a log on the fire first thing in the morning and using that fuel throughout the day. And I'm like, how does this, but what do I do with this information? Because I also sort of felt like maybe breakfast isn't the best way to start the day, like,
Yeah.
or at least having breakfast at 7 in the morning isn't the best way to start the day. And so I'm like, I don't know, I just feel like there's so many of these crazy rabbit holes when it comes
Oh my
to
gosh.
what you're eating, what supplements you're taking, and like
Hmm.
it's just dizzying. And the irony of it being dizzying on somebody who has ADHD in the first place is not lost on me, because I'm like,
There's so many
like
rabbit holes. You can just jump from hole to hole. That's how the
I know, right? And so I mean, and it makes sense that like you were saying in the beginning, like we are just like chronic learners. We are obsessed with finding answers, and I think that
yes.
that's part of our
Yes.
identity too.
Yes.
Um, and I don't even remember what my train of thought was. I don't know.
Well,
I always think of you when I think about my own like eating journey over the last year, because I've been doing so much tweaking in terms of like what's working and what's not. Or even sugar, like sugar. God, it's so problematic to talk about sugar like it's this addictive substance. But then at the same time, like I certainly noticed huge behavioral differences in my children when they had sugar and when they didn't.
oh
And so
yeah.
what do you do with that? You don't want to limit it, because then you have
Right.
all these other
Right.
issues when you start
Right.
limiting foods, because then you
Right.
get into like restriction and binging. And but at the same time, like there's a lot of tweaking when it comes to what you're putting in
Oh,
your body, and then you
totally. And that it's so frustrating because there's not one answer. There never will be. And
right.
that's all I think we ever want is one answer. You know, for
Yes.
some people, eating early in the morning as soon as they wake up is going to change their life. And for other people, they're going to feel like they've got a bowling ball in their belly for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Like there's no one answer. You know, I think with when people start to feel better when they change their diet, whether they do intermittent fasting, keto, or any changes, a lot of times the one thing that they do is cut out because you know when you're like, oh, I'm going to do intermittent fasting, a lot of times we also with that like handheld, we're going to probably make better choices at the same time.
Right.
And so a lot of times I wonder if it just comes down to cutting out all the junk. And are we feeling better? Even like bringing it back to maybe MTHFR, which a lot of the population has either one or two copies of this gene abnormality. Are we cutting out all this enriched flour that's everywhere? And those pathways are able to function again. And that's why we're feeling better. It's almost impossible to figure it out for the masses, what's making them feel better if they try keto or if they try whatever. It almost like we have to look at every single individual and break it down, which is exhausting. But that's really what it takes, because for some people it's cutting out folic acid, and for some people it's cutting out sugar
I
or
know.
inflammatory oils, or maybe their body just shouldn't eat in the morning. It's exhausting.
It is, and we do
Yeah.
not tend to have casual relationships with things.
No,
Like
not at all.
I gave up drinking because I finally came to a point where I was like, I cannot have a casual relationship with alcohol. I never could. I just was able to kind of, you know, live with that
Yeah.
knowledge. And I think there was a point when we were during lockdown, very soon into lockdown, like March 27th was the day that I was like, I am drinking a bottle of wine every night and I'm not okay with this, and I don't know how to stop it, and I don't know how to have wine in the house without drinking a bottle of wine, so I have to
Right.
get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then getting rid of it was really easy because I wasn't leaving the house or seeing anybody or going anywhere. And then like after a couple weeks, I was like, "Oh my goodness, I have this feels amazing." Like I didn't
Yes.
realize how much alcohol was like was bleeding into the next day in terms of brain
Yeah.
fog and energy.
Yes.
And then suddenly it was like the thought of drinking was no longer appealing to me because it
Yeah.
came with all of those other things that then come with drinking. Just like when you have a
Mm-hmm.
food allergy, where you're like, it's
Yeah.
really easy to give up food when you have an allergy to it because it's like
Yeah.
your motivation becomes wanting to avoid all of these negative side effects.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult to give things up when you enjoy them and you feel like you should give them up for some other bigger reason. And
Totally.
so, like, yeah, so like I have been just, thinking so much about deprivation in its different forms and how like we don't have a really great relationship with moderation. And so like you said, like when it comes to when we make food choices and when we get on these diets, the reason why some of these diets work so well is because yeah, like you're just generally thinking about your food more and you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about, and so you tend to eat better food in general. and
Yeah.
and but that never stayed, like you can never like keep that going for its own sake. Usually
Mm-hmm.
we end up becoming either orthorexic and becoming
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with
Mm-hmm.
how far can I take this, how far
Right.
can I take organic, and how far can I take
Right.
whatever. Or you just give it all up and you throw your arms up in the air and you're
Yeah.
like, forget it, I'm going to go back to eating Halloween chocolate for dinner, which believe me, I did a lot of. and I was even just having that conversation with my husband the other day because I've gotten back into this habit of like always having a bag of Halloween chocolate in the house, and I was like, I just feel like it's like affecting my sleep, and I feel like I'm just like I
Yeah.
really just need to stop eating the chocolate. And he and
Mm-hmm.
he but I was like, I can't have it in the house without eating it, like it has to be gone. And I was like, that feels disordered. Uh,
I know.
oh, god. So anyway, I don't know if this, I'm assuming this is all, this rant is making sense to whoever's listening, of just like that idea of like I think moderation is so important in life and it feels
Yes.
easy to certain people. And I think for us, moderation is so difficult.
Nothing. No, it's all or nothing. A
Yeah.
hundred or zero.
And
But I think like for us, it has to actually make sense to us personally.
mhm.
to be able to say eliminate something if we need to. Like with you with alcohol, you're able to do that now because it makes you feel that much better. And to you, that's worth it. It's worth it to you to not have that fog and to not have that lack of energy. But if it didn't provide you those things and you were just like, oh, I'm not supposed to drink that, screw it. You're just gonna, it's like we have to actually have a personal, like rooted attachment to the feeling we get from eliminating something that we shouldn't have. Otherwise, it's just not going to be worth it to us. I feel it's
Yeah.
just going to be too easy to come off of it. But like maybe for you, alcohol, it's actually pretty easy right now to say no to it because it's giving you a real personal better. You feel it's worth it enough to you. You feel better enough that it's worth it. You know?
Yeah, and it's funny too because I sort of wonder like, will I ever drink alcohol again? And what will that say about me? And what will that mean? You know, like it's so, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we get so wrapped up in like what our choices mean
Yeah.
in terms of who we are. And even
Yeah.
even intermittent fasting, like I did the whole thing, you know, I tried it completely in the closet because I was like, I can't be open about this. Like I can't, if I start like talking about intermittent fasting as somebody who is anti-diet, like I would get so much vitriol. Like nobody can understand this journey of mine, and I have had to really sort of come up with that idea of like, no, this is my own personal journey,
Yes.
and I don't have to answer to anybody. And
Yes. Correct.
um, but it still makes me feel really sad when people who are in like body positive intuitive eating RDs that I follow who are like intermittent fasting is terrible, and I'm like, oh, that means I'm terrible. And what does that say about me? And I'm, you know, and
Yeah.
it, you know, it can be. I don't know. I don't want to come. I'm just fascinated by the whole thing, and I certainly am not like everybody should be do intermittent fasting because you know, I just read that book intuitive fasting that there was all this like outrage. Did you hear about this?
I
It was this,
did.
yeah. So there was all, I read it so that the world doesn't have to because it's terrible. but
Had a feeling.
but it's so diety. Oh my god, it's so awful. But I was curious because I was sort of like, there is a part of me that feels like there is some intuitive element to
Yeah.
playing
Yeah.
with not restriction but like playing with time windows when it comes to eating.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like turning windows on and turning windows off really appealed to me because then I didn't have to think about food
Right.
when my window was off. And I was like, for me that kind of like intense structure really worked.
Yeah.
And I had the like I had the least complicated relationship with food I ever had with intermittent fasting because I
Hmm.
didn't have to think about, am I hungry, am I not hungry, am I doing that, you know. It was just like, now I eat, now I don't. Very much, you know how dieters are often like, I wish there was just a pill that I could take.
Yeah.
And I was like, and you'd always sort of feel like, god, has your relationship with food like, is it so messed up that now you would rather have a pill? Like that's really sad. But anyway,
Yeah.
um
It makes sense though why that worked for you in a way because if your brain is very all or nothing, that's it's black and white for you.
right.
Black and white. Like yes, I can eat, no, I cannot. And you know, I think maybe doing things like that for the sole purpose of looking fit, having weight loss,
Yeah.
all of that, yeah, that can get really messed up real fast mentally. But I do think it's a totally different ballgame when you are playing with your food when it comes to feeling really good. Like
Right.
if you, to me, that's a totally different animal in a way, because the end goal is to feel really good and not just look good in whatever bathing suit you've decided that you need to fit into that year. I mean, the thought of saying like, oh my gosh, if I don't eat breakfast, I have much more energy at the end of the day. That's a cool thing to play around with. If I don't eat breakfast so that my jeans button, that's not going to end well mentally. You know what I mean? That might put you down a bad rabbit hole mentally. But playing with things to better your daily well-being and quality of life, I'm cool with that personally.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day that was really kind of what I how I ended up after much like constant questioning with my therapist and everything of feeling like, am I doing something terrible for myself? Is this going to bite me in the ass at some point? Like at the end of the day, it was, yeah, it was like, what is my motivation? Why am I doing what I'm doing? If it's to feel better, then that's just between me and my body. It's also not that simple. I feel like there's a lot of choices that we make that do have weight intertwined in some way. Like I think it would be great if it was that simple, but I don't feel like it is. But anyway, that's a whole
It's
other.
true though. I even, even with this little elimination diet that I'm on, which obviously won't last forever, it's just for right now. I went to my husband the other day and I was like, I haven't lost a damn pound. And he was like, so? And I was like, oh yeah, so? But that
I
was like, I just like walked out of the bathroom like, he was like, so what? That's not why you're doing it. I'm like, okay, great. Like it's just sort of
I know. I had that
deeply
same
ingrained in
reaction.
us.
I know. I had the same reaction when I quit drinking. I thought I was like, the weight
Yeah.
is going to fall off when I stop drinking. And it didn't. And I was like, that's unfortunate. And I was like,
That
why am I even thinking of this way? And I was like, because I live in this world. Like, that's
yeah,
the other thing. I have to stop beating myself up over the fact that I exist in this society and
that's a
am
tough
going
one,
to
but
have those
yes.
thoughts. Yeah. So, what was it like telling your parent? Because since your brother was diagnosed as a kid, no, what and how does first of all, what was it like talking to your parents about this, and then what was it like talking to your sister about this?
I'm a real open book person.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I can't keep anything to myself unless it's like somebody's secret, and then I will take it to the grave. I'm real good at other people's things, but my own, I'm like, so as soon as I got out of that appointment, I'm texting my mom and my sister like, she said I have this, and I started getting all Liz like. But when we all like started looking at the symptoms of adult onset for female or just adult ADHD for females, my mom and my sister and I were like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. And my sister was even like, I think I might have a little of this myself. Like we were all really open to it. And
Mm-hmm.
we all have known that like, my dad also has, similar traits as well. So it was kind of like a bonding for all of us. Like, oh, okay, like maybe we weren't all bouncing off the walls like my little brother, but we all do have, at least my sister and my dad and I'm not sure my mom so much, but my sister and my dad and I all have this like sense of like, oh yeah, maybe we do all have the same like thread woven through us
Yeah,
that we come from the same root,
I
issue.
know. Yeah, the
Yeah.
hardest thing for me has been not being able to talk about this with my mom because I feel like there's so many answers that have come from this, and there's so many times that like I know I made her cry. Like I made her cry when I dropped out of school for the 12th time. Like
Yeah.
all of these ways in which she wanted to help me and couldn't, and like ways in which she saw me struggling, and so many things that I've talked about with her over the years. And like, it was so hard after this diagnosis. I was like the one person I know would be super interested and excited about all of this. I can't
Oh
talk to her
yeah.
about it.
Totally
uh,
what moms are for, totally.
yeah.
Especially as a child. I'm sure she experienced so many things watching you grow where she would be like, yeah, she would totally affirm it for you.
I know. Yeah, yeah, because so much of this diagnosis is like going back over your whole life with
Yeah.
this new lens and this fine tooth comb and just being like, oh, right,
There it
yeah.
is. Yeah.
And then when I went back and looked through my report cards to see like were the signs there? I feel like they were there, and then seeing it so clearly in black and white from like a very young age. And again, just
Yeah.
being like, wow, nobody had a clue.
Yes. Totally. I had a
Yeah.
similar thing. I stopped caring in fifth grade. I remember specifically fifth grade math got hard and my brain is not math geared. And I just decided I just like, and I always had like has potential and like has all these things on and the things I was interested in, I got great grades, but the things I didn't care about, I got terrible grades. And there was always like has potential, needs to pay attention, like and I was like, it's just all right there. It's all
Yeah.
right there. All right there.
So now
Yeah.
did you think about ADHD in terms of parenting, especially when your son was a newborn? Because I feel like I that was a lot of struggle that I now look back and think like, because I was diagnosed with postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, and I look back at a lot of that and think, oh no, that was ADHD, and I just needed some goddamn sleep. uh, but so I'm curious because
Yeah.
you sort of knew about that, you
Yeah.
knew about your diagnosis before you had your
Mm-hmm.
second. How do you look
I
back at
truly
both
did.
your kids?
I tucked it back here for a long time. Like
Yeah.
she had said it to me, and I sort of just tucked it back here. And I didn't really. I'd be honest, I didn't really think about it. Although you bring that up now that I think about it, because I had really bad postpartum anxiety, really bad, like totally. I mean, totally whack, like out of left field thoughts that made no sense. I felt totally and I had no sleep, and really didn't sleep until like the last 5 months, I would say. This was the first time in 4 years that I've slept. And I think that it's made a huge difference and totally how my brain responds. But no, I really didn't think about it. I was so overcome that honestly never popped into my head.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this time when we talk about struggles, I've likened it to like when my husband complains about his headache. And I'm like, I would like to switch bodies right now to find out if your headache is really as bad as you are complaining it is.
Yes, I think that all the
Because I
time.
get headaches and I don't complain nearly as much
Yeah.
as you do. And so I think it's the same thing with like with struggle when it comes to like
Mhm.
those moments in our life, those times like in school or with when you have a newborn or in parenting in general where it's like, am I struggling more than the average person? Does
Right.
everybody feeling this way? Is this
Mm-hmm.
common? Is this not? Those questions are again like we need solid concrete answers to these things and
We
we don't get
do.
them.
Yes. All the time. We need the answer. I drive my husband crazy with that. I always want to know why, why. It
Yeah.
drives me crazy.
Well, and the other thing that's been fascinating to me because I'm sort of out about it and have like become the ADHD person in people's
Mm-hmm.
lives now, and so I get a lot of like people will forward me things and be like, I saw this thing about ADHD and it reminds me of you. And I'm like, that's nice. Thank you. I've already read a lot about that. Don't worry. I've got it covered. but,
Huh?
you know, um, but I also like sometimes I will sort of make these lighthearted posts about like things that people with ADHD struggle with. And people who have ADHD will respond to those posts like you do, which is like, oh man, I hear you. I relate.
Hand
Oh
up.
my God, right?
Yeah.
Preach. And then there's other people who respond in this way that's like, I'm sorry that you are struggling. Have you tried getting a planner? And you're like,
Ugh.
or they're like ways in which it's really feels like a violation. I don't know, like
Mhm.
I get really like irrationally angry at those
Yeah.
responses and then I'm like I'm going to stop talking about ADHD because I feel like the misunderstandings and the stigma around it really
Huge.
bother me and I'm sort of
Huge.
like I'm in this point right now where like I want to advocate and I want to show people
Yeah.
what it looks like, but I also get so irritated when people think it's like a disease, or people
Yeah.
think that it's somehow I'm struggling about it. And I'm like, I don't know how to
Yeah.
talk about the struggles, but at the same time, like feel like I'm not actually struggling. Or am I?
Sure.
I don't know. But like I don't want your pity, god damn it. So
Yeah.
like
There's a total
um
stigma about it. I think a lot of people think that it's like a weakness in a way, like, well, just figure out how to organize better. And I'm
right.
like, I've never thought of that. Thank you. How helpful. But yeah, there's a lot of this like, hmm, some people can be a little holier than thou when it comes to things like this because it is, some of the manifestations of ADHD do appear like you don't have it together in certain things, and it is difficult to be out there, and I'm sure it's very difficult to be out there with it and have to deal with. But on the flip side, you might be helping somebody who hadn't thought about ADHD realize what's something that's been bothering them their whole life.
Right. Well, and I think about that too. Like my whole life I've been an oversharer who impulsively just blurts out things about my life and then I regret it because I'm like, "Oh, now I seem like whatever blank to people." Where it's like you can't manage people's reactions to you and that can be frustrating, but I also realized that like when I talked really openly about dieting, there were so many people who were so grateful for the
Yeah.
fact that I could articulate these things and talk about my
Mm-hmm.
personal experience. And I was like, this is a gift. This is a gift I have of being impulsive and blurting things
Yes.
out without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And oh well, and I would just kind of talk about that I'm Sophia from the Golden Girls and I don't have whatever self censor you need. I don't have that. And so on this sometimes I regret saying things and posting things, but for the most part, I always feel like, it's my cross to bear, and
It's
I'm
worth it,
helping
I
people.
find.
I
You're
do.
always going to have some people that are going to, pee, quote unquote, pee in your Cheerios, but I think that it's worth it to help somebody actually, you helped me when you posted that because it really got my brain going again, which sort of triggered out this whole entire little sequence of events that has led me to where I am right now, which is in I hope, a really good place of me finding my own root cause. So you helped me tremendously, and you might not even have known it.
Aw,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I've actually had a few people on this podcast who I've interviewed who found out about their own ADHD through my podcast or through
Yes.
something I posted where I was like, I felt like their midwife, being like, oh, it's everything comes full circle, which is nice.
Yes. There
Well,
will
I'm happy to
always
help you
be
because
haters.
um, I know, right? So, okay, so we have been talking a lot about some of the struggles, but what's something you love about your ADHD?
Um, I don't even know if this makes sense or not, but I love all of my train tracks because I love that I can talk to you. I could, if I wanted to, I could talk to you, text somebody on my phone and listen to a TV program and totally have a full, full comprehension of everything that was going on. I truly love that. Uh, whether that's right or wrong or good or bad, that's one of my favorite things is that I'm so, I don't know. I could never focus on one specific thing. I like that I can have my ear as a mother. I think that's a good thing. I can have my ear to all kinds of different things. I don't know. I like that. I used to freak my coworkers out because I would sit and type a note for one of my residents at the nursing home, and I would literally type the note while talking to them about something else, and the note would come out. My boss used to freak out, and I just like those little things. And I don't know if I'd be able to do that if I if I hadn't grown up with a brain like this.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I've always related to that idea of if you want something done, give it to a busy person, because I
Yeah.
certainly feel like I'm most productive when I have a lot of things happening and a lot of things on
Yes.
my plate,
Yeah.
which I like. Um, and I love your train tracks analogy. That's great. I'm going to steal that because it's like the other thing that I really like about it is how you can be so many things, like how
Yeah.
I've had like so many pivots and so many
Yes.
180s and so many different things that I'm
Yes.
interested in, and that like constant learning and being
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, now I'm certified in this, and oh yeah, now I'm going to be this, and then be like, oh yeah, no, yoga, that was last year, okay, now I'm
Oh
doing
my
this.
God, yes. God, I
and
relate to that so much.
and it
I like
doesn't
too.
surprise me that you're taking this total 180 now from
Yes.
being you so registered dietitian and personal trainer. Are you still doing personal training, or is
Right
that
on point.
lost?
No, I'm not.
But it's okay. That's what I mean. Like I
Um,
love knowing that you're like, yeah, it ran its course, and now
yep.
I'm doing this.
That is another thing I like is that I am impulsive, and I'm because of that I've never been afraid to do things that maybe others might be afraid to do. Like like right now, I've been a dietitian for 13 years and I'm totally about to change careers. I'm not telling people so much yet what I'm doing, but I'm about to like totally leave healthcare and try something new, which, I talk to people maybe without this type of brain and they're like, why? Why would you do like what you have a stable job and why? But I don't know. I want to. Last year, no, 2 years ago now, I really wanted to cut all my hair off. And for some people, that might have taken a whole lifetime to build up the guts. And I was like, let's go do it. And growing it out, it was a nightmare, but now I'm a pixie cut survivor, but it was worth it. I loved it. I like to see what happens.
Yeah.
I do also like, for some reason, my brain is very stable. And I like stability when it comes to relationships. That makes me happy. Like with my husband, I don't feel all over the place. I'm super chill. I'm so happy here. But like everything else in my life, I want to change it. I want to do this. I want to do that. I
Mhm.
want to. So it's nice that I have like a little bit of an anchor.
Yeah, I was
So
talking to Matt about that recently because I was thinking about like relationships and friendships because something that we struggle with, I can't, I'm trying to use words other than struggle because I feel
ah,
like it's not necessarily a struggle, but it's something I think that a lot of women with ADHD that I've talked to have in common is feeling complicated when it comes to friendships, especially with other women, and feeling like a bad friend a lot of the time because you're not able to show up for people in the way that you feel like you should. And yet you have a hard time valuing the things you do bring to relationships.
mm,
And I certainly have like hot, cold relationships with most people in my life where like I
yeah,
come in hot, I'm really super into them, and then I fall off the planet and years go by, right?
that's why you and I work actually because we're both that way and we both mean no harm when it's cold. It's just it's not the time for that right now. And then we come back together and it's like,
I know. Well, and
jump
that's
right
what
back in.
I know, and I that's what I love about knowing that you have ADHD too, because it gave me the freedom to just be like, oh, I don't have to feel bad anymore, because I sort of always felt like I had done something to get us off whatever
Well,
communication track we were on, and then
yeah,
you start to internalize that guilt, and then you're like, I'm a
sure.
terrible person, and then you're Homer
Yeah.
backing into the bushes,
Yep.
never to talk about that again with that person. And I was just like, I feel like we have so many of those relationships in our
Hmm.
life where it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like I've done something wrong, I don't know why I've offended you, and I'm just going to slowly back out of your life for your own
Yes.
sake. And so I was talking to Matt. I was like, how is it that we have had this like totally relatively uncomplicated relationship for 20 years of just like, you're my person and I don't
Yeah.
have any of that complication with
Yeah.
you. And so we talk a lot about that, because he just immediately was like, well, I'm not another person to you. I'm an extension of you, And so I
Huh.
think that there are people in your life who become extensions of
Hmm.
you, where you are just yourself with them, like you can't help
Yeah.
it. And so you don't feel, I mean, I certainly feel guilt and shame in my relationship in certain ways, but you don't
Sure.
have that same sense of like how I'm supposed to be acting, or how I'm supposed to, obligation or anything. Like people, there's certain
Right.
people that you love, your kids, your parents, your partners, who are just extensions of you, and they're sort of in your orbit, and
Right.
you don't have to worry about cultivating the relationship so much.
I
Well,
like that.
I don't know. I mean, I certainly feel like relationships are work, and
Hmm.
there's certain things you need to do, but I don't know. Yeah, it's been interesting to sort of feel like, why is it I can have this super stable, one stable
Yeah.
relationship and not have any issues with it,
Yep.
and yet feel like so many other relationships in my life
Yep.
end up being problematic.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
So I'm so glad, because I do feel like my coming out about this, I love that you're back in my life, but also in an uncomplicated way.
Yes, it
you
shall
know?
probably always remain uncomplicated. If things ever go cold with us, I always know it's in no way. It's just the ebb and flow.
I know, right? And one of my best friends in life is a friend of mine who I met in university, and we will go a year without talking.
Yeah.
And then one thing we always talk about, what we love about our relationship, is that like we hit the ground running like nothing ever
Yep.
happened, and that
Oh, I
there's
love that.
never been any sense of like, you don't call me enough, or you don't text
Yeah.
me, or you
Ugh.
forgot this, and
Ugh.
right? And so that I
Those are
was
like
like, well,
daggers to somebody with our brain. Like,
I know
ah.
exactly. And then the other thing that's been really difficult with the pandemic too is just like, I realize that face to face communication is ideal. And so like if I feel like I have a lot to say to somebody, I'm just like, can we just like have coffee, or just, like, let's just have a dinner date or something. Like I can't like text you or
Oh, that's
email
interesting.
you.
Yeah, I like
It's
that.
too arduous. And
Hmm.
so when that option of like going out for lunch with somebody was suddenly taken away, I suddenly had no social outlet whatsoever, because I was like, I don't know how to communicate with people
Yeah,
unless we make dates.
I get that.
And so that's why I started this podcast, because I was like, oh, this is an excuse for me to have like stimulating conversations
So
with
many
people.
dates.
It is like dating other women,
It is like
but I'll never speak to you again. So that
It's so funny that you say that though, because I'm a registered dietitian, right? And I know that you are anti-diet, and I have always been worried that I offended you with something that I've said. And isn't that so funny? So here we are knowing that we hopefully have never gotten that from each other.
No, I know. I mean, you never offended me, but I do sort of feel like we got to like a crossroads where I sort
Yeah.
of felt like my life choices are not in opposition to yours, but I was sort of like, I don't know how to have this conversation anymore.
Yep, I
And
agree.
but it also made me feel like I, um, I don't even know. I don't think this will be in the podcast. I'll probably cut this out. But I just sort of felt like I I also like felt really bad about myself too. Like I was at a point where I didn't even realize, and I'm just untangling all of this, but
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of like my issues with intuitive eating were just like, I feel like intuitive eating is offered to people as this alternative to dieting.
Mm-hmm.
And intuitive eating can be really problematic for me and my brain. And now I'm like, oh, I spent 4 years trying to embrace intuitive eating and feeling like I was a failure at it and feeling like I wasn't very good at it and feeling like I was doing something wrong. And why am I unhappy? And why am I gaining
Right.
weight? And if I am gaining weight, why am I not okay with that? I need to be
Yeah.
okay with that because of body positivity. And like, I was just going through such this like inner turmoil journey with like who I thought I should be
Yeah.
with intuitive eating. And that's why with the ADHD diagnosis, it just sort of was like, oh, maybe intuitive eating isn't the end all be all answer
Yeah.
to leaving dieting behind. And I certainly feel like Weight Watchers isn't the answer, but I also feel like maybe there's a way in which I can like reintroduce structures,
Mm-hmm.
and reintroduce a sense of like uh accountability,
Yeah.
or just like I think I had to go through that really intense pendulum swing because our lives are all about the
Yeah.
pendulum, right?
Yeah.
But I felt like I had gotten into a point in my life where I was like unhappy. Like I was just really unhappy with those things and I didn't know how to talk about that with
Yeah.
somebody like you. And so then I was sort of like, "Oh, I'm just going to retreat because I
I get
can't."
it.
And it's so
No, I
those are
get
those
it.
things where it's like that's why I pay therapists.
Yes.
And so I feel like I'm just like in such a better place now in terms of like, I don't feel like I'm doing something wrong if something's not working for
Nice.
me. Like that's been the biggest change for me with this diagnosis is like, if something's not working for me, that is on that. It's not my fault,
Yes. Oh,
it's the
love that.
system.
Mm-hmm.
And so and for whatever reason I was able to see that when it came to dieting, but I wasn't able to see that when it came to the next phase in my life, which was just eating anything all the time whenever, just
Right.
following my body and feeling like at some point my body is going to tell me what it needs and I'm going to listen and everything's going to fall into place. And it's sort of the same thing that's like organization, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like at some point I'm going to get to this sense of like everything's going to make sense and I'm going to know how to do everything properly and I'm going to feel at peace. And then I'm like, and I just got farther and farther away from that
Yeah.
feeling when it came to
Yeah.
intuitive eating. And I didn't know what the next step was yet. And so,
Yeah.
when you're sort of like, you're in that mire of like, what I'm doing isn't working, but I haven't found the next new, exciting, shiny object
Right.
that's going to make me realize the next step. And so, and then for a while it was, and like I tried intermittent fasting because I was like, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Like I had gotten to this point where I just was like so tired, so unhappy. I was like, I felt like my weight was on this like speeding train. And so I had gotten to the point where I couldn't do the exercises I used to even be able to do.
Yeah.
And I was, so
Yeah.
then it was like, I saw
Yeah.
myself kind of snowballing
Yeah.
toward type 2 diabetes and like all of these things that I sort of felt like, okay, intuitive eating was okay 40 pounds ago, but now I'm
Right.
not sure I'm on board with it. And how do I
Yeah.
feel about that? And if I, anyway, very complicated. But my point was like, I felt like I got to this point where I was sort of didn't know, I I was so unhappy and I didn't know how to
Yeah.
talk about that. And so I
I
just
get
was
that.
like, oh, I'm going to just leave. Like, I just like abandoned Worth It and just like decided I was going to be on the PTA and make that my life for 2 years. And
That goes with your
right.
ADHD, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We jump all
So
in and then, oh, a new pool to jump in.
I know, right?
Hmm.
Exactly.
I did that. I got so into Ayurveda for a long time. I was obsessed with it just because it was fun, not necessarily because I felt like this is the end all, but I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
And I was so obsessed with it. And I was like, I'm gonna eat like this forever. And Josh was my husband was like, okay, no, you're not. Like he's seen me just ding, ding, ding. Look what I even wrote in today.
Oh yeah, right.
My
And then I made
fancy
merch.
notebook. Your merch. I love it. It's the perfect
um
size for me. I'm probably gonna keep buying them because it's the perfect notebook, actually.
Aw, well, let me know.
Um,
I'll give you like a discount code or something.
I like to support. I don't need that. I'm happy to pay and support. Um, but yeah, I get that with the jumping in and out of pools. Maybe we'll never stop doing that. Maybe we will. Maybe we need to stop thinking that that's wrong. to do that.
Yes, I think such an important mindset shift too, which is
Yeah,
like there
maybe
is
that's
no
okay.
end goal. And I think about that a lot with body image too. When I think about there was like a big moment for me when I was at my lowest weight with Weight Watchers where I was
Hmm.
like trying on a bikini and I was so excited because I was like, I've never had the confidence to wear a bikini before. And I was trying on this bikini and then I stood there and I was like, no, I still have cellulite on my ass. No, I feel like if I bend over, my stomach has too many rolls. And I was like, and that was this aha moment for me where I was like, you're never going to be happy. Like, there's no point where you are going to be comfortable in a bikini. So you either have to give up the
Hmm.
idea of a
Hmm.
bikini or you just have to wear one.
Except,
And
right,
right. And so I
right,
feel like it's the
right.
same way with like organizing or even just happiness. Like,
Yeah.
or peace. Maybe peace is a better word. Or feeling like you're where you're supposed to be. That maybe where you're supposed to be is just always finding that new
Well,
interest, and
yeah.
that is the strength. That is
Yeah.
the beauty is
Yeah.
the chronic learning.
Yeah. Maybe it's not wrong. Somebody has to do it. That's how things get discovered. Somebody jumping around. It's fine. We're fine. We're good.
All right. Did you? I asked about renaming ADHD.
Hmm.
Okay. So if you could rename ADHD to something else because so many of us find it so problematic,
Okay.
what would you call it? Have you thought about this?
Yeah, but I was being silly about it because that's where my brain goes.
No, I love that.
Okay. So to me, in so many ways, this should be called OMGD for oh my God disease. Like that's all I do, where I'm just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like in every different way, that's how I feel like when you know, the proverbial squirrel, it's me being like, oh my God, like looking over here. Oh my God. I don't know if you watch Schitt's Creek ever, but it's truly my favorite show I've ever watched. And one of the main characters, David, is it's his tagline. He just does it all the time, and I relate to him so much because he's always just like, "Oh my God." That's how I feel. I'm just like, oh my God. So anyway, that's sort of just being silly, but that's where I come down to like the things that we discover, and then like the things that change our interest completely, and then it's just
Yeah, right. It's so nuanced because yeah, there's so many ways that you're like, oh my god, like you're distracted. Oh my god, oh I love this. Oh, this
oh,
new thing. Oh my god. And then there's like the way things hit you, even though
great.
you've been told it 12 times, but
Mhm.
for whatever reason, the 13th time you're like,
It sinks in.
oh, oh my god. Yeah, right.
That's how I feel with this disease. All the
That's
different oh
freaking
my gods.
that's brilliant. Oh, I love that. That
I
is that is really good. Oh
was
my
feeling,
god.
oh
I
my
love
God.
it. Oh my god.
You gotta
Uh,
watch that show. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's truly brought me so much joy. So much
um,
joy.
I know. I do love it. I feel like it's not within my husband's and my Venn diagram, so
Mhm.
it's one of those shows that like the next time if he ever starts traveling for work again, that's going to be the show that I binge watch the week he's gone because I've tried watching it with him many times and like we've started and gotten a couple episodes into it and then he's sort of like, let's watch something else. And like my window of television watching before I fall asleep is so small
Yes, I get it.
that like we only find things that are within our Venn diagram. But I know
Totally.
I would love it. I mean, everything about it is
So wonderful. I
perfectly
watched it alone
within.
too. Josh likes it, but I had to watch it alone, and that's
When do
fine.
you get to watch TV alone?
I actually discovered it a long time ago,
Okay.
and I started watching it when I was on maternity leave, and I had just had Parker, so I had a newborn who was like nursing nonstop. So I watched Schitt's Creek, and then I've just watched watched the seasons as they've come, and laughed so much. It's brought me so much joy. I love that show.
Oh God, I just had that flashback of binge watching shows on the couch with a baby attached to your boob for
Mm.
hours.
It's so nice in a way, but I'm so excited to not do that again.
Oh,
Like
I
I
know.
was so excited. It feels so good to be done. Know that.
I know. And you know, I've
It's
talked to
good.
so many women who have like little babies or you know, who have like toddlers even, and I just want to give them such a hug cuz I'm just like, "Oh, it gets so much better. Like every
Yeah.
year it gets better."
It helps me because our son, I always joke with Josh, like you put Josh and I together and out comes a tornado. Like Parker is just uh, so much energy. And honestly, he's probably of the same brain that my little brother is. Um, and well, I've totally lost my train of thought. Look, gone.
I
Oh my
know,
God.
right? We're talking about the struggle of kids. But I'm curious now that
Oh yes, but
I
it's
meant
nice
to
that
ask you that if you feel like either Lily or Parker has
Lily, no.
ADHD.
Oh, I remember what I was saying. So I had my daughter so much younger. She's 8 years older than Parker, and I would have had them closer, kids closer together, but with cancer, I couldn't. And I was always worried about having that gap, like it was going to be annoying, like because we wouldn't be able to do the same things. But it's such a help to see Lily, who just turned 12, like how good it can get. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love like her age and that we can go anywhere, and she has these adult conversations with me, and she gets dirty jokes, and like there's such good stuff that comes from having older kids that like it's helped me cope through these toddler years with my son, who, as much as I adore him, he is wicked hard,
Mm.
really hard. This pandemic has absolutely broken us because it's just with two working parents and one toddler with no childcare. But I told my daughter, no, she's a totally different personality, mind, brain than I am. But my son, it's without a doubt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's without a doubt. Actually, and I don't really know how I believe in these things, but my brother passed away. My little brother with the ADHD, he passed away when I was 9 weeks pregnant. So he knew that I was pregnant and everything. And I swear that he just sort of like put a little thumbprint on my son as he left this world, because my son is stunningly like him. And
Mm.
I like shake my fist to the sky, like, why did you give him this? Of all the things, why? Why? But it's really stunning how they're like he's totally cut from us and our excitability. So it's interesting. It would be interesting to watch, but I love that I will hopefully have the tools to help to be his parent, knowing that he has, a different way of looking at things, and maybe some other kids will.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do have so much gratitude for the pandemic in that I got to see a side of my son when it came to learning and how he learns and his reaction to classroom environment. That really opened my eyes to
Um,
how what he struggles with and what he will struggle with moving forward. And now that I have a name for it and
mhm.
I feel like I can help him so much more than I ever would have if I had known before I knew what ADHD even looked
Right.
like. Because I just saw so many, even both my kids. I haven't decided if my daughter has it yet or not, but like both of them. Like I just feel like I'm so much better equipped to help them
Yeah.
as a result.
Yep. It's a gift for sure.
Yeah, just don't tell me I'm struggling. I
I
don't know
know.
why it bothers me so much. I know
Because
people
it's
just want to
negative.
help. I know, but
Negative.
I guess it's just that like confirmation that people see me in like as a weakness. I don't know.
Mm.
It's something
Yeah.
about like being seen as weak is really a difficult thing
Yeah.
for me, even though I
Yeah.
love to talk about my struggles openly. But
I
I'm
think
like, when I was really
talking about them,
struggling,
the weakness is fades away.
yeah, well, and I feel like when I was really struggling, I wasn't posting on Facebook. Like when I was really
You disappeared.
struggling, I disappear.
Yeah.
And so those are the like when I'm back to posting all the time, then I'm like, yeah, I don't, I'm over it. I've moved on to something new.
I say.
Oh, this has been so wonderful. I don't want to
Yeah.
keep you on this
Likewise.
beautiful day, but it's been so nice to catch up and
Yeah.
hear your story. I was so curious, and I'm grateful that you were able to do it
Yeah.
in this kind
Thanks
of
for having me.
formalized way.
This was really fun. When you asked me, I was like giddy. I've been like
Yeah.
this all weekend. I'm like, yeah, it was exciting. It's
um,
exciting to do this with you. And discover. I feel like this has given us a whole new branch of the world to discover, and things to open up, and things to uncover, and that's fun for our personality.
yeah.
Find the next thing.
And every time the Holderness family talks about ADHD, I'll send it to you and be like, "This reminded me of you."
Okay. Please do.
I'm so bitter. Anyway, okay. All right. I will let you go, but hopefully we'll stay in touch more and
And if we don't, that's cool too.
yeah, that's true.
But I would like that as well.
All right. Well, please, I adore you and I love having you in my
Likewise.
life regardless. So, all right. Well,
Yeah,
take
likewise.
care
Yeah, you
and
too. Kisses.
bye.
Bye, friends.